Hey drivers, YouTube's DOT physical expert, Dr. Nuesse, back again with another video. And in this one, we are going to talk about when CDL drivers must be drug tested. So this is a subject that sometimes can cause some confusion. I see it in my offices. Sometimes when drivers come in to get their medicals done, they don't know if they are supposed to get their drug test before they get their DOT physical or before they can get hired. So let's clear a lot of that up, because there are a lot of reasons that the FMCSA is going to want you to be drug tested, but then there are also some scenarios where you don't have to be drug tested. So this is all about when you need to be drug tested and the different scenarios that will cause you to have to be drug tested. This isn't about what we are testing for or how we are going to do a drug test. I've done videos on those subjects in the past. If you want to check those videos out, this is all about when you are going to be drug tested. So luckily, in this case, the FMCSA actually gives us a nice, concise resource that we can reference. So I'm going to take you through it, and I'm going to explain some of the different situations and when you are going to or not going to have to be drug tested. So if you are a CDL driver, I would encourage you to please continue to stay subscribed to this channel and hit the bell icon next to the subscribe button, because the FMCSA sometimes changes these standards. When they do, I'm going to make update videos so that you're not hit with any surprises when you go in next time to take your medicals. All right, so let's take it directly from the FMCSA's website. All right, so here is the FMCSA's website I have pulled up, and I will leave a link to this particular page as a reference down in the description box below if you want to read through these different parameters as far as when you are going to need to be drug tested. But I'd like to kind of go through them, and we will talk about the different scenarios and when you will and when you will not necessarily need to be drug tested. So first things first is pre-employment. So, and here's the standard. An employer must receive a negative drug test before permitting a CDL driver to operate a commercial motor vehicle. This is 382.301. So what that means basically is that you cannot start the engine of, let's say, an 18-wheeler, any vehicle that requires a CDL. You cannot start operating that professionally until the employer receives a negative drug test. So that does not mean that you cannot be hired. That doesn't mean that you can't do all the rest of your medicals before having your drug test done. It just means that you cannot start the engine of a commercial vehicle that requires a CDL without having a negative drug test first. I hope that clears a lot of the misconceptions, again, that I often hear at my office from drivers up. Before you start the engine of that commercial vehicle, please have your drug test reported to your employer before you start working. All right, and the next category is post-accident. So if there is an accident involving a commercial vehicle, again, that requires a CDL, and some commercial vehicles do require CDL and some do not, and I've again done videos on which ones do and which ones don't in the past. You might want to reference that. But if an accident occurs with a commercial vehicle requiring a CDL, they give you this nice chart that you can reference to determine if you need to be drug tested after that accident or if you do not. So let's go through that chart. Okay, so first on this chart is if you're in an accident and unfortunately someone dies in that accident, are you going to be drug tested? Well, there are two scenarios here. So if there's a human fatality and you are cited, the police officer believes that you are the one at fault, you caused the accident. If you're cited as the driver by the police, then you are going to be drug tested. It's mandatory that you are drug tested. And then going down one, if there's a human fatality and you are not the one cited. So let's say someone just runs into you. You are completely in the clear. You are not at fault. You are not cited by the police officer. You are still going to have to be drug tested. Now, whether you feel like that is fair or not, it doesn't really matter. The standard is the standard. This is what's going to happen. I want to give you the correct information. So if there is an accident involving a commercial motor vehicle that requires a CDL to drive, the driver of that commercial vehicle is going to be tested if someone dies because of that crash, whether it is the commercial driver's fault or it is not. That is a big point that I want to clear up. I want to make sure that it's very, very clear. All right, so moving down to the next section here, bodily injury with immediate medical treatment away from the scene. And we have two scenarios here as well. So basically what that means is if there is an accident, again, involving a commercial motor vehicle that requires a CDL, and somebody, doesn't really matter who, needs to be treated, let's say at a hospital, they're taken away at an ambulance and they're treated away from the scene. Will you be drug tested? So again, two scenarios. So if you, the commercial driver, are the one cited, if the officer feels that you are at fault, you are issued a citation, then yes, you will be required to have a drug test. Now, if the officer believes that you are at no fault, potentially the other driver is at fault, even if someone needs to be transported to the hospital and treated, then you will not need to be drug tested. So this is completely different from if someone dies due to the accident, whether you are at fault or not. In this particular case, if the officer believes that you're not at fault and you are not cited, then you will not be required to have a drug test. Okay, and then moving down to the final scenario when it comes to post-accident drug testing. This one is disabling damage to any motor vehicle requiring a towaway. So you get into an accident and one of the vehicles, whether it's yours or someone else's vehicle, must be towed from the scene. Will you be required to have a drug test done? So this one is kind of in line with the bodily injury. If you are cited, if the officer believes that you were the one at fault, then you are going to be required to have a drug test performed. But if the officer feels that you are in the clear, that you are not the one at fault, you are not issued a citation, then you are not going to be required to have a drug test done. All right, so that covers all of the post-accident drug testing. Now let's get down to random drug testing, and I will just read you off the standard. CDL drivers must be randomly tested throughout the year. This is 382.305, an employer who employs only him or herself as the driver. So basically you're self-employed as a driver, who is not leased to a motor carrier shall implement a random testing program of 2 or more covered employees in the random testing section pool as a member of a consortium. So basically you just go into this big pool and then randomly your name will be selected to be drug tested throughout the year, or maybe it won't be randomly selected. But this is the random selection process. So you are going to be in this big pool with other drivers, and out of that pool, randomly throughout the year, people are going to be selected to be drug tested. So you could just, again, receive a notice that you need to be drug tested, and you will have to be drug tested whether you were in an accident or getting hired to a new job or not. All right, and this next section down is reasonable suspicion. And I think this one is kind of obvious. Drivers who appear to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol can be immediately tested. So if you seem to be under the influence, they don't want you driving, obviously. So you're going to be immediately tested. So employers must retain CDL driver supervisors to detect the symptoms of driver impairment. So employers are going to be looking out for if you are impaired either with drugs or with alcohol, and if they suspect that you are going to immediately then be tested. All right, and then finally, let's talk about if you were ever to fail a drug test or refuse to take a drug test, and that would fall under the follow-up category. So this is required for drivers who either, again, tested positive, refused to test, or otherwise violated the prohibitions, and who have completed the return to duty process with a DOT qualified substance abuse professional. So if you were ever to, again, test positive or violate the standards, or you just refuse to be tested, then you're going to most likely be referred to a substance abuse professional, an SAP, and then they have the authority to have you retested or follow up tested. So it states that this testing is prescribed by the SAP, the substance abuse professional, for a minimum of 6 directly observed tests in 12 months. So 6 tests where they're going to be observing you, actually giving your sample and then testing it. but can be extended for an additional 4 years. So this has a lot to do with what the substance abuse professional determines is appropriate. They have a lot of leeway here. So that's under the follow-up category. All right, drivers, so I hope that was very, very helpful, informative, and straightforward. Again, subscribe for more information about CDL driving and the medicals. And until next time, drivers, stay safe.